The village of Amurue hummed with life as dawn broke over the red clay roofs of its scattered huts. Women, their wrappers tied tightly around their waists, shuffled between homes, balancing clay pots of water on their heads. Young boys chased one another with sticks, their bare feet pounding the dirt paths, while the rhythmic clanging of the blacksmith's hammer echoed in the distance. Life was routine, predictable, and safe for most, but not for Obinna. Obinna was crouched by the edge of the village stream, scrubbing the soot from his hands. The morning's work of splitting firewood had left his palms raw and aching. He glanced at his reflection in the water, a thin boy of 15, his sharp cheekbones and hollow cheeks betraying years of hunger. His dark, piercing eyes held a depth that belied his age, as if they carried the weight of knowledge and pain far beyond his years. In the distance, Mama Ngozi's sharp voice cut through the peaceful sounds of the stream. "Obinna, have you finished the pots, or will you waste your day lazing by the water like the useless boy you are?" Obinna clenched his fists, biting back the retort that lingered on his tongue. Mama Ngozi was just one of many who reminded him daily of his lowly status in the village. He was an orphan, without parents or family to shield him. To the people of Amuru, he was a shadow, a burden they tolerated because custom demanded they take care of the parentless, even if grudgingly. He picked up the bundle of firewood he had gathered earlier and trudged back toward the village, his feet kicking up small puffs of dust. Obinna's life had always been a series of unkindnesses. His parents had died when he was just 6 years old, leaving him with nothing but a small woven mat and a rusted charm necklace his father had given him. His father, a celebrated hunter, had been bitten by a viper during one of his expeditions into the evil forest. Though he had been carried back to the village, the medicine man arrived too late. His mother, unable to bear the loss, withered away within months. After their deaths, the village elders decided Obinna would be passed from one household to another, each family taking turns to care for him. But care was a generous word for what he received. Most treated him as free labor, sending him to fetch water, sweep compounds, and tend to livestock, all for scraps of leftover yam or beans. Despite the hardships, Obinna endured. He was resourceful, crafting traps to catch bush rats, and climbing the tallest palm trees to pluck ripe fruits. His sharp eyes and nimble hands earned him whispered admiration from a few of the older men, who marveled at how a boy with so little could accomplish so much. But admiration was fleeting. To most, he was still just the orphan. One evening, as the village prepared for the annual Iriji festival to honor the spirits of the land, Obinna sat alone beneath a mango tree, watching the villagers decorate the square with bright cloths and carvings. He wasn't invited to participate. Such events were for families, and Obinna had none. He watched as young men carried the sacred drums to the center of the square, their muscles rippling under the weight of the massive instruments. The elders, dressed in white robes, chanted prayers to the ancestors, their deep voices resonating like thunder. Children danced in circles, their laughter filling the air. Obinna's stomach growled, reminding him of the little he had eaten that day. He was about to leave when he heard whispers behind him. 2 women were speaking in hushed tones, their voices heavy with excitement. "Have you heard? The oracle has spoken," one said. "What did it say?" the other asked, leaning closer. "The Ijele Mask must be retrieved this year," the first woman said. "It's the only way to bring blessings to Amuru." Obinna's ears perked up. The Ijele Mask was a sacred artifact hidden deep within the evil forest, a place feared by all. Every 10 years, the village was required to send someone to retrieve it. This person, chosen by the oracle, would be crowned the leader of the village. "But who will go?" the second woman asked. "The elders will announce it tomorrow," the first replied. I pity the poor soul they choose. No one has ever returned alive. Obinna felt a chill run down his spine. The evil forest was a place of nightmares, filled with restless spirits, poisonous creatures, and traps set by malevolent forces. The next morning, the village square was packed. Every man, woman, and child had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. The oracle, an old woman with skin like aged leather and eyes clouded with cataracts, sat on a wooden stool in the center of the square. Beside her stood Chief Obinna, a broad-shouldered man with a voice that commanded attention. "The spirits have spoken," Chief Obinna began, his voice booming over the crowd. "The Ijele Mask must be retrieved to secure the blessings of our ancestors." The crowd murmured in apprehension. Chief Obinna raised a hand to silence them. "The oracle has chosen the one who will undertake this sacred task." All eyes turned to the oracle. She rose slowly, her bony hands gripping a carved staff. Her milky eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Obinna. "You," she said, her voice rasping like dry leaves. "Obinna, the orphan, shall go." The crowd erupted into gasps and whispers. "Obinna, the boy with no family, he will die before he even reaches the forest's edge." Obinna's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to run, to disappear into the crowd, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. Chief Obinna's smirk betrayed his satisfaction. The elders had hoped the oracle would choose someone expendable, and Obinna fit the bill perfectly. That night, Obinna sat alone, outside the small hut, where he had been allowed to sleep. The weight of the oracle's decree pressed heavily on his chest. He had no choice but to go. Refusing the oracle's command was unthinkable. It would bring shame and misfortune upon the village. But the evil forest was certain death. As the stars glittered above him, Obinna fingered the charm necklace his father had given him. It was the only thing he had left of his parents, a simple string of cowrie shells that his father had sworn would protect him. "Maybe this is my fate," Obinna whispered to himself. "Maybe I am meant to die so others can live." But deep within, a spark of defiance flickered. If he was going to enter the evil forest, he would not do so as a victim. He would fight with every ounce of strength and cunning he possessed. At dawn, the villagers gathered to see him off. Obinna stood at the edge of the forest, a small gourd of water tied to his waist, and a hunting knife tucked into his belt. The crowd was silent, their faces a mix of pity and relief. "May the spirits guide you," Chief Obinna said, though his tone was insincere. Obinna glanced back at the village one last time before stepping into the forest. The trees loomed above him, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. As the forest swallowed him whole, Obinna gripped his charm tightly. He didn't know what awaited him, but one thing was certain: he would not go down without a fight. The evil forest swallowed Obinna like the open jaws of a beast, its thick canopy cutting off the sunlight and plunging him into an unnatural twilight. The air was heavy, laced with the scent of rotting leaves and the occasional bitter tang of unseen flowers. Every step he took was accompanied by the sounds of rustling bushes, distant growls, and the haunting cries of unseen creatures. Obinna clutched his father's charm tightly, his fingers trembling as he moved deeper into the forest. The charm felt warm against his palm, as though it carried a life of its own. He whispered a quiet prayer to the ancestors, asking for guidance and courage. The first few hours were uneventful, though each rustle in the undergrowth made his heart jump. He had been warned that the evil forest was alive, its spirits watching every intruder, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the day dragged on, Obinna came across a massive tree unlike any he had ever seen. Its trunk was wide and gnarled, its bark shimmering faintly in the dim light. Its branches twisted and coiled like the bodies of snakes, and its leaves seemed to rustle, even though there was no wind. Obinna approached cautiously, drawn by the strange energy emanating from the tree. At its base, he noticed something glinting, a small wooden carving of a face. It looked ancient, its features worn smooth by time. He bent down to pick it up, but as his fingers brushed the carving, the tree came to life. Its branches writhed, and from the crevices in its bark slithered dozens of snakes, their scales glistening and their eyes glowing with an eerie green light. "You dare disturb the sacred tree," a voice hissed, low and menacing. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. Obinna stumbled back, his knife trembling in his hand. The largest snake, as thick as his arm, slithered down from the tree and coiled itself in front of him. "Leave, boy, or be devoured," it hissed. Obinna's mind raced. He could run, but the snakes moved too quickly. Fighting seemed foolish, as his knife would do little against so many. Instead, he remembered the stories his mother used to tell him, stories of spirits that valued courage and cleverness over brute strength. He straightened his back and met the snake's glowing eyes. "I do not wish to disturb your tree," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "But I am on a journey to retrieve the Ijele Mask. If I turn back now, my people will suffer. Let me pass, and I will leave your tree unharmed." The snake's eyes narrowed. "And why should we trust you, Orphan? Humans are treacherous, their words empty." Obinna reached for his charm, holding it up for the snake to see. "This was my father's. He swore it carried the blessings of the ancestors. Let their spirits judge my intentions." The snake studied him for a long moment before slithering closer. It flicked its tongue, tasting the air around him. Finally, it reared back and hissed. "You may pass, but remember this, the forest watches. Your courage will be tested again." The snakes retreated, disappearing back into the tree. Obinna exhaled shakily, his legs trembling as he hurried away. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to grow darker, though Obinna couldn't tell if it was because night was approaching or because the trees had thickened above him. His throat was parched, his lips dry and cracked. He had sipped sparingly from his gourd, knowing it wouldn't last long. When he heard the sound of running water, relief flooded him. He followed the sound until he came to a narrow stream, its crystal clear water sparkling even in the dim light. Obinna knelt by the stream, cupping his hands to drink, but something made him pause. The water shimmered unnaturally, and the reflection staring back at him was not his own. Instead, it was a face he didn't recognize, a man with dark, piercing eyes and markings etched across his forehead. The man's lips moved, though no sound came out. Obinna recoiled, his heart pounding. The stream stilled, and the face disappeared. "You're thirsty, aren't you?" A soft, melodic voice whispered. Obinna spun around, but no one was there. "Drink, child," the voice urged. "You have nothing to fear." Obinna tightened his grip on his charm. The stories of the evil forest were clear. Nothing was as it seemed. "I thank you for your offer," he said aloud, addressing the unseen presence. "But I will not drink from this stream. I carry my own water." The air grew colder, and the voice turned sharp. "Foolish boy, do you think your pitiful gourd will last? You will die of thirst before you reach your destination." Obinna's hand hovered over the gourd at his waist, but he hesitated. The charm around his neck felt warm again, as though warning him. "I would rather die with my honor intact than drink what you offer," he said firmly. A gust of wind whipped through the trees, and the stream rippled violently before settling again. The voice fell silent. Obinna walked on, his throat burning, but his resolve unshaken. As night fell, Obinna found a small clearing and decided to rest. He built a fire with the dry sticks he had collected, its warm glow a small comfort in the oppressive darkness of the forest. He sat with his back against a tree, his knife in his lap. The night was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant howl of an unknown creature. Suddenly, the fire flickered, its flames rising unnaturally high. The air grew cold, and a figure stepped into the clearing. It was a woman, tall and regal, her skin the color of ebony, and her hair flowing like a river. She wore a dress made of leaves and bark, and her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. "Who are you?" Obinna asked, his voice trembling. The woman smiled, her teeth white against the darkness. "I am Neoma, guardian of this forest. You have intrigued us, boy." Obinna's grip on his knife tightened. "What do you want from me?" Neoma tilted her head, studying him. "I could ask the same of you. Why does an orphan risk his life for a village that scorns him?" Obinna hesitated before answering. "Because it is my duty, and because I believe I am meant for more." Neoma's smile widened. "Bold words for a boy so young. Perhaps you are meant for more, or perhaps you are merely foolish. Time will tell." She reached out, and Obinna flinched as her hand hovered over his charm. "Your father's spirit watches over you. He was a brave man. Let us see if his son is just as worthy." Before Obinna could respond, Neoma vanished, leaving only the faint scent of wildflowers in her wake. Obinna sat by the dying fire, his mind racing. The forest was alive with challenges, but it seemed the spirits themselves were watching him, testing him. He didn't know if he could survive, but he knew one thing: he could not turn back. Clutching his charm, he whispered a promise to himself and his parents. "I will not fail." As the fire flickered out, Obinna closed his eyes, readying himself for whatever lay ahead. Obinna woke to the distant calls of unseen creatures, their cries echoing through the dense forest. The air was heavy with moisture, and his fire had long since died, leaving only cold ash at his feet. His muscles ached from the previous day's journey, but the weight of his task pushed him forward. He could not fail. Gripping his charm, he stood and began walking. Each step seemed to echo in the forest's oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. The path ahead grew more tangled, the trees twisting into shapes that resembled clawed hands reaching for him. Hours passed, or so Obinna thought. Time seemed to stretch and twist in the evil forest, as if the sun itself was reluctant to mark its passage. The oppressive silence was broken when he stumbled into a clearing filled with soft, golden light. In the center of the clearing stood a modest hut, its thatched roof swaying slightly in the breeze. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, and the scent of roasted yams filled the air. Obinna's stomach growled, the ache of hunger gnawing at him. As he approached cautiously, the door of the hut creaked open, revealing an old woman with a kind face and a warm smile. She was bent with age, her hands gripping a wooden staff adorned with tiny charms. "Come in, child," she said, her voice soft and inviting. "You look tired and hungry. Let me offer you some food and rest." Obinna hesitated. Nothing in the evil forest was as it seemed. His mother's warnings echoed in his mind. "Beware gifts that come too easily, my son. Not all kindness is genuine." "Thank you, Mama," he said politely, keeping his distance. "But I cannot stop. My journey is urgent." The old woman's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And where does this journey take you, child?" "To retrieve the Ijele Mask," Obinna replied, his tone cautious. The woman's face darkened. "The mask," she hissed, her voice suddenly sharp. "You think yourself worthy of it? Foolish boy!" Before Obinna could react, the hut dissolved into smoke. the clearing transforming into a dense thicket of vines that twisted and writhed like snakes. The old woman's voice cackled around him, echoing from every direction. "Prove your worth, then. Let us see if you can escape." The vines lunged at Obinna, their thorny tendrils reaching for his arms and legs. He drew his knife, slashing wildly as he backed away, but the vines seemed endless, regenerating faster than he could cut them. Desperation clawed at Obinna as the vines tightened around his ankles, threatening to pull him down. He gripped his father's charm, pressing it to his chest as he shouted, "Ancestors, guide me." The charm grew warm in his hand, its heat spreading through his body. A sudden burst of light erupted from it, blindingly bright and golden. The vines recoiled, hissing as if burned. Obinna wasted no time. He scrambled to his feet and ran, the light from the charm illuminating his path. The old woman's laughter faded behind him, replaced by the whispering of the trees. The forest grew darker as Obinna ventured deeper. He came to a wide ravine, its edges crumbling and jagged. A faint mist rose from its depths, obscuring whatever lay below. Spanning the ravine was a narrow bridge made of bones, their bleached surfaces glowing faintly in the dim light. Obinna approached cautiously, his heart pounding. The bridge creaked under his weight as he tested it with one foot. It seemed sturdy enough, but the sight of the bones unsettled him. Who had built this, and whose bones were they? As he stepped onto the bridge, a voice rang out from the mist below. "Turn back, boy," it said, deep and resonant. "This path is not meant for the likes of you." Obinna ignored the voice, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. The bridge swayed with every step, the mist rising to lick at his ankles. "You will fall," the voice taunted. "You are not strong enough. You are alone. Who will save you when you fail?" Obinna stopped, gripping the hand-woven rope on either side of the bridge. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Strength comes not from the body, but from the spirit. Stand firm, my son. I am not alone," Obinna said aloud, his voice steady. "The ancestors walk with me." The mist swirled angrily, but Obinna pressed on, refusing to look down. When he finally reached the other side, the mist dissipated and the voice fell silent. On the other side of the ravine, Obinna encountered a wide river, its waters black and sluggish. Small ripples disturbed its surface, though there was no wind. A canoe sat at the riverbank, its wooden surface worn smooth with age. As Obinna approached, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a man, tall and thin, with skin as dark as midnight and eyes that seemed to hold the stars. He wore a simple robe of black and carried a staff carved with intricate symbols. "Do you seek passage?" the man asked, his voice calm and measured. Obinna nodded. "Yes, I must cross the river." The man tilted his head, studying him. "This is the river of shadows. Many who cross it lose themselves. Are you prepared to pay the price?" "What price?" Obinna asked warily. The man smiled faintly. "Your memories. To cross, you must leave behind the burdens of your past. Only then can you face what lies ahead." Obinna's heart clenched. His memories were all he had: his parents' faces, his mother's songs, his father's lessons. Could he truly give them up? He clutched his charm, its warmth grounding him. "I cannot give you my memories," he said firmly. "They are the reason I fight. Without them, I am nothing." The man's expression softened, and he stepped aside. "Then you may cross, for you have shown wisdom. But beware, the shadows will test you." Obinna climbed into the canoe, his hands gripping the paddle as he pushed off from the shore. The river's surface rippled unnaturally, and the air grew colder with every stroke. As Obinna paddled, dark shapes began to emerge from the water. At first, they were faint little more than wisps of smoke, but soon they took on more distinct forms, twisted figures with hollow eyes and mouths that whispered his name. "Obinna," they hissed. "You will fail. You are nothing. No one cares for you." Obinna gritted his teeth, refusing to listen. He focused on the rhythm of his paddling, each stroke pushing him closer to the far shore. The shadows grew bolder, their voices louder and more insistent. They reached for him with clawed hands, their fingers brushing against his arms. "You are a burden," one shadow said. "They sent you to die," another added. Obinna clenched his charm, shouting, "I am more than their doubts. I am my own." The shadows recoiled, their forms dissolving into the river. The canoe glided smoothly to the opposite bank, where Obinna stepped onto solid ground, his legs trembling but his resolve intact. As Obinna looked ahead, he saw the faint outline of a massive tree in the distance, its branches glowing faintly with a golden light. He knew instinctively that this was his destination, the place where the Ijele Mask awaited. But between him and the tree lay more challenges, and the forest whispered of dangers yet unseen. With a deep breath, Obinna tightened his grip on his charm and stepped forward, his heart steady and his spirit unyielding. The towering tree glimmered faintly in the distance, its golden light piercing the oppressive gloom of the evil forest. Obinna's breath quickened as he pressed forward, his muscles aching and his mind heavy with exhaustion. Yet, the promise of the Ijele Mask kept his steps steady. The air grew heavier with each step, laden with an otherworldly energy that pressed against his chest. The forest seemed to whisper all around him, its voices a cacophony of warnings, questions, and laughter. Obinna held tightly to his father's charm, the warmth of it grounding him. "You are close, boy," a voice murmured, deep and melodic. It echoed through the trees, sending shivers down Obinna's spine. "But are you ready to face what lies ahead?" Obinna stopped, scanning the forest. "Who speaks?" he demanded, his voice steady despite his fear. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing. He was draped in flowing robes of black and gold, his face obscured by a wooden mask carved with intricate patterns. His eyes glowed faintly beneath the mask, their gaze piercing. "I am the guardian of the threshold," the figure said. "Before you may approach the sacred tree, you must prove yourself one last time." Obinna straightened his back, gripping his knife. "What must I do?" The guardian tilted his head. "The Ijele Mask demands sacrifice. Show me what you are willing to give." The guardian waved his hand, and the forest around them dissolved into a vast plain. Before Obinna stood three figures. His mother, her warm smile radiant, and her arms outstretched. His father, standing tall and proud with the charm he had passed down glowing on his chest, and a young boy, frail and wide-eyed, his features painfully familiar. "These are the pieces of your soul," the guardian said. "The love of your mother, the wisdom of your father, and the child you once were. Choose one to leave behind." Obinna's heart wrenched. He looked at his mother, her comforting presence a reminder of everything he had lost. His father's silent strength spoke of the lessons that had shaped him. And the boy was a reminder of his innocence, of the dreams he had once held before life had hardened him. "I cannot choose," Obinna said, his voice breaking. "You must," the guardian said. "The Ijele Mask demands it. Only those who can let go of the past are worthy of the future." Obinna fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He clutched the charm at his chest, its warmth pulsing steadily. Slowly, he rose and turned to the boy. "I am sorry," Obinna whispered, "but I can no longer be you. I must be more." The boy smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "You already are," he said softly, his form dissolving into light. The guardian nodded, his glowing eyes seeming to soften. You have chosen well. The burden of the past can be heavy, but it is not what defines you. The forest reappeared around them, and the path to the sacred tree was clear. The sacred tree towered above Obinna, its golden light illuminating the clearing. Its branches stretched endlessly into the sky, and its roots pulsed with a steady rhythm, as though it were alive. At the base of the tree rested the Ijele Mask. It was magnificent, its surface a blend of gold and ebony, adorned with feathers and beads that shimmered in the light. The mask seemed to hum softly, as if aware of Obinna's presence. He approached slowly, his heart pounding. As he reached out, the air around the mask shimmered, and a voice resonated in his mind. Why do you seek me, child? The voice asked, deep and ancient. Obinna knelt before the mask, bowing his head. I seek to bring honor to my people and fulfill the destiny the ancestors have set before me. The voice chuckled softly. Many have sought me before, but few have understood my purpose. The Ijele Mask does not bring power, it reveals truth. Are you prepared to face yours? I am, Obinna said, his voice unwavering. The mask rose from its resting place, its glow intensifying. It hovered before Obinna, who reached out and placed it over his face. The moment the mask touched his skin, Obinna's vision blurred. He found himself standing in a vast void, surrounded by swirling lights. Before him appeared a figure cloaked in shadow, its features shifting constantly. Who are you? Obinna asked. I am you, the figure replied. The doubts you carry, the fears you bury, the strength you do not yet see. The figure stepped closer, its form solidifying into a mirror image of Obinna. You have faced many trials, but the greatest battle lies within. Do you truly believe you are worthy of being king? Obinna hesitated. The question cut deep, touching the insecurities he had carried all his life. He thought of the villagers who had scorned him, the elders who had sent him to die, the whispers that he would never be enough. But then he thought of his parents, their sacrifices, and the lessons they had imparted. He thought of the forest, the trials he had overcome, and the courage he had found within himself. I do, Obinna said, his voice firm. Not because I am perfect, but because I am willing to fight for my people, to protect them, even if they doubt me. The figure smiled, its form dissolving into light. Then you are ready. Obinna awoke to find himself kneeling at the base of the sacred tree. The mask was still in his hands, its glow dim but steady. The forest was silent, its oppressive energy replaced by a serene calm. He stood, cradling the mask, as he began the journey back to the village. The path seemed shorter now, the forest parting before him as if guiding him home. When he emerged from the evil forest, the sun was rising, its golden rays bathing the land in light. The villagers, who had gathered at the forest's edge expecting to see nothing but a lifeless body, gasped in shock. Obinna held the mask high, his voice ringing out with newfound strength. The Ijele Mask has chosen. The ancestors have spoken. The elders fell to their knees, their expressions a mix of awe and shame. The people who had once scorned Obinna now looked upon him with reverence, their whispers filled with admiration. But Obinna did not seek their approval. He had faced the forest, the spirits, and himself. He knew now that his worth was not defined by others' opinions, but by his actions and his heart. As the village erupted in celebration, Obinna stood tall, the Ijele Mask shining in his hands. He had walked through darkness and emerged as the light his people knew. Obinna stood at the heart of the village, the weight of the Ijele Mask in his hands heavier than he had ever imagined. The villagers had gathered around him, their faces a mixture of awe, disbelief, and respect. They had not expected him to return, let alone return victorious. With the mask in his hand, as the mask glowed faintly in the morning light, Obinna could feel the eyes of his people on him, waiting for him to speak, to give them answers, to give them. He raised the mask higher, his voice strong and clear as he addressed them for the first time, not as the orphan boy they once ridiculed, but as the man he had become. "I have returned," Obinna began, his gaze sweeping over the faces before. "Not as the boy you thought you knew, but as the one chosen by the ancestors to lead. The Ijele Mask has given me more than power. It has given me clarity." The villagers remained silent, hanging on to his every word. The elders who had once sent him into the evil forest with no hope of return, now looked upon him with reverence. Their eyes, filled with regret, spoke volumes of the realization that they had underestimated the boy they had tried to break. "The forest tried to take my life, but it only gave me my strength," Obinna continued. "The ancestors did not choose me because of my birth or my blood. They chose me because I refused to let the darkness claim me. And in doing so, I found the light within myself. The light that lives in all of us." Obinna took a deep breath, his chest swelling with pride and a sense of responsibility. He turned to face the elders, his eyes. "I do not seek revenge, nor do I seek pity. I seek only to help our people find their strength, just as I have found mine." The oldest of the elders, a man whose name was whispered only with fear and respect, Obinna, stepped forward. His shoulders, once broad and imposing, seemed smaller now, as if the weight of his years had finally caught up with him. He bowed his head before Obinna, a gesture that was both humble and acknowledging. "You have shown us all what it means to be a leader," Obinna said, his voice quiet but firm. "The power of the Ijele Mask is not in its gold or its feathers, but in the heart of the one who wears it. You have passed the trials of the forest, and you have passed the trials of the spirit." The other elders, too, knelt in front of Obinna, their heads bowed in acknowledgement. The people, watching this display of respect, began to murmur among themselves. For the first time in their lives, they saw the young boy, who had once been an orphan, as the true heir to the throne. The ceremony took place that evening, beneath the stars, with the sacred tree at the village's center. The people gathered around the massive trunk, its branches stretched wide, as if welcoming the return of the lost son. Obinna stood before the villagers, his heart filled with both pride and humility. The Ijele Mask, now placed upon a golden pedestal, shimmered in the firelight, its power palpable in the elders, along with the spiritual leaders, stood at his side, each dressed in their finest robes, their faces serene. The ceremony was simple, yet profound. One by one, the elders stepped forward and placed their hands upon Obinna's shoulders, anointing him as their king. The people chanted, their voices rising into the night sky, a prayer of hope, a prayer of renewal. Obinna accepted his new title, but he did not stand above the people. He stood among them, his heart as one with theirs. As the final elder, Obinna, placed the ceremonial crown upon Obinna's head, the crowd fell silent. The weight of the crown was not a burden to Obinna. It was a symbol of the responsibility he had long accepted. "You are our king now, Obinna," Obinna said, his voice filled with respect. "Lead us well, as you have led your..." Obinna nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The challenges of leadership were great, and the scars of the past would never fully fade. But he had learned that the strength of a king was not in his title, but in his actions, his choices, and his ability to uplift others. The people of the village gathered before Obinna the following day, waiting for his first decree as king. The sun had risen high, casting a warm glow over the land. Obinna stood before them, his heart calm and his mind clear. He had thought long and hard about his first action as king, It would not be to punish those who had wronged him, or to seek vengeance on the elders who had sent him to die in the forest. It would not be to prove his strength, for he knew that true power came from the unity of his people. I decree, Obinna said, his voice firm yet compassionate, that we will rebuild our community with love, respect, and unity. No longer will we be divided by birth or blood. We are one people, bound by the land, the ancestors, and the trials we have faced together. From this day forth, every child, no matter their birth, shall have the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to lead. Our strength lies in each other, and together we shall prosper. The people erupted in cheers, their voices carrying across the village. They saw in Obinna not just a king, but a leader who had walked through darkness and emerged with a heart full of love. He was not perfect, but he was determined. And that was all they needed. Years passed, and Obinna's rule was marked by peace and prosperity. The village grew and the people thrived, guided by the wisdom of their king. Under his leadership, the evil forest, once feared and avoided, became a place of reverence, a symbol of the trials that had shaped their people and their king. Obinna never forgot the lessons he had learned in the forest, nor did he forget the kindness and the cruelty he had encountered along the way. He ruled not with an iron fist, but with an open heart. And when the time came for Obinna to pass on his legacy, he entrusted the Ijele Mask to the next chosen leader, not because it held power, but because it was a reminder of the strength that lay in each and every one. As Obinna looked out over his people one final time, he knew that he had fulfilled his destiny not as an orphan, but as a king.